Peter Chang here, and I am going to start off with my SCX-60 build with building out bag B. And the reason being is just that with bag B seems to be a great place to start. It's one of the shorter points of this build, and I would suggest doing a few things, making sure that all your parts are there, and also reading through the 56-page manual at least just one time through. If you read through the manual just one time through, it's going to really just totally cut down on all the questions that you might have. What's interesting about this build is that X Factory has actually included a nose piece, and the nose piece actually has like some flashing to it. So quick, easy little step that you could do is just take some sandpaper, just kind of, or a file, just kind of like file it down just a little bit so that the fit is a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and just take some sandpaper. Ideally, when you're sandpapering and these RC parts, you should get a little finer grained sandpaper. Hobby shops would sell like some better sandpaper. If you go to like Home Depot or Menards, you're going to find just some coarser sandpaper, and it's just not really as refined as what you might be needing. In this case, I learned the hard way that I actually stopped by like a local hardware store and they only had just like 200 or 300 grade sandpaper, but in a hobby shop they would have like 600, 800, 900 fine grained sandpaper. So I'm going to open up the screws to bag B here, and I also want to point out that my carbon fiber is actually all sealed, so I used CA tire glue to properly seal all the edges of the carbon fiber, and they've already been sanded off. So it's about another few hours of sandpapering and sealing and making sure that your CA glue is properly sealed. So you need to do that step before you start assembling bag B here. So also just remember just to take your time here. With this step, it's one of those crucial steps that you want to just get right, and just be patient. What I found was during parts of my build, I would be pretty impatient and try to rush through things, and then realize that I wasn't doing the right thing. Also, make sure that you get enough sleep when you're building out your build. Sometimes it's just so exciting that you just keep building into the night, and you're tired all day the next day, so that's no good either. So also just make sure you have all the right tools as well too. Having the right tools would also make it easier for you to finish out parts of this build. Here I'm either using my Weehaw hex driver or my Hoodie hex driver. So pretty much initially it's just trying to get that first piece of carbon fiber in there. I'm not really super familiar. When I started working on this project, I hadn't really worked with that much carbon fiber, because all my kits were just basically just, you know, like your typical plastic or flexible plastic components. Carbon fiber is a little bit interesting. It's very stiff. It's has that consistency of kind of like plywood, but it's very interesting. It's very stiff and rigid. So just taking care, just using my time to get this one in. So I'm going to just screw this in just a little bit so that it's just set in. I'm not going to screw it all the way. It's just it's kind of interesting, but just trying to get that first piece in there was perhaps the most difficult part for me to get in. But once I got that down, the rest was pretty easy. So I'm starting with, like to point out that I'm starting out with bag B because I'm waiting for my other parts to arrive. Generally, if you're reading through the X Factory instruction kit, it instructs you to start with the transmission. You go through like the SE10 assembly, and then you go through the transmission bag. But I decided to do like a little bit of a different build. So I love my stock SC10 kit so much. I'm going to keep that for just bashing, and then my SCX-60 CF I'm going to use for racing. So this is the reason why I'm just waiting on parts for the build, and why I'm starting off with bag B. So once I got the two decks in there, I'm just gonna do another screw in there, try to get this lined up. And you're watching my build just happen in real time here, and really I just have to be patient with this part of the build. And currently it's a little bit out of frame. I'm just lining up the that third layer of carbon fiber, and what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the holes line up, and as I continue screwing, making sure that everything threads right through. What I found was that if I wasn't looking, it would get out of alignment. It's not like carbon fiber is not like plastic, where you could kind of be inaccurate with the way you're screwing certain components in, and the plastic would continue to thread. Carbon fiber is very stiff and not as malleable, and less forgiving if you don't have anything dead set or dead straight on. So there we go. I've got the top part in. I'm going to go ahead and screw in the other side and just continue lining those things up. So once I have that lined up, and I've learned now, I'm going to just align those two pieces of carbon fiber set up straight so that we get those in. And you're going to watch me make all the possible mistakes that you could possibly make when building out your SCX-60 CFs, and I like to point out my mistakes to you in the hopes that you don't make the same mistakes that I do, so that you've learned from how I've messed up, and would do a much better build on your X Factory car. So got those in, and then next part is I'm gonna line up the hex washers, or the, I'm sorry, not hex washers, but the nuts, so that I could get those in. And I'm just gonna go ahead and get these in a little bit more before I put in the nuts in there. And this part you need to get right, because this is the bridge between the nose piece. So I want to make sure I have this nose piece set up correctly, so that my car doesn't fall apart. So I suppose I want to point out that you'd probably use thread lock at this part, but I was just unsure of how this was going to go together. But thinking about it, looking at this video now at this point, you could potentially use thread lock, and you could actually go and do it that way too. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue screwing this part in, and just be patient. Sometimes as you're screwing in the components and you notice that it doesn't quite line up, just stop and then go back and then start screwing it back in again. Alright, so I'm going to put out this piece, and it's kind of, as you're building this, it's this part of the build is kind of interesting, because it doesn't look like things would be lining up, but they do work out pretty good in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and just screw this part in, and just be patient with that. So what's nice about the Weehaw tool is that it has that rotating head, so I could just continuously keep screwing in that same position and not really have to like realign or retool what I'm doing. So once again, just two flathead screws go right in the bottom, and you're all set once those two screws are sunk in. You just have to put on the two nuts at the top, so you have four nuts in that area. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and just continue screwing this part in here. Just making sure that it's nice and tight, and that the carbon fiber pieces fit flush with each other. If you have the pieces that are kind of like one piece is up, one piece is down, and it's not flush, you want to just pull out the screw, try to rescrew it in again, so that all your pieces are flush. It's important to have this part right because it's the bridge between the nose piece and the body. There we go. I'm just gonna pull it out of the frame for a second to check to make sure that I'm doing this flush. With the video camera, the angle goes off and I can't tell if I'm flush or not. There we go. Everything is looking good, and just gonna go ahead and just put this other screw all the way in, and just keep pushing this one in. If you have the if you're actually taking apart your donor car, this would not be your first step. Bag B would not be your first step. You would actually start with the transmission set. So just wanted to remind you that. But if you're ordering parts and stuff and you're waiting for everything to arrive and you're just itching to get going, Bag B would be a great place to start. So there we go, making sure that that point is flush. All right, it's looking awesome. Really digging this part of the build here, and everything seems to be lining up great. And then that bay where you're seeing, this is actually where your servo would go. So this becomes the servo bay, right behind that nose piece. All right, just lining up the nose piece here, making sure that this is going to be going good. And just making sure that everything here is lining up. So we have this plastic nose piece, and then we have carbon fiber. It's kind of interesting materials to be working with. All right, just making sure that it's lining up. It's gonna look pretty good here. Everything's gonna be nice and flush. There we go. Putting in my screws in here, and just making sure that this is gonna be working. I'm gonna get this one in here. And it's kind of funny. It's what I've been finding. I love my hoodie hex Allen wrenches, but when I reach to grab them, they look the same. So oftentimes I find myself grabbing the wrong one. Just but I love the feel of these hex wrenches the best. It's just so nice and so comfortable and so lightweight. All right, so I'm gonna put in the other one. I'm doing this in a star pattern, so it's kind of a diagonal, and getting this one in. And I love as you watch more of my RC building videos, you're gonna notice that I love using the star pattern because I feel that parts just fit that much better, and they align that much better if you use a star pattern. There we go, and I'm just gonna put this other one in just a little bit here. Get that initially screwed in. I'm not gonna screw everything down just yet. I want to make sure that everything is going to fit okay. So fitment is important. And then once again, just don't rush through. You're watching everything happen in real time here, and I think I'm about 15 minutes or so into the build, so you might be building this faster now that you've seen me build this, but just so you know, just take your time with the build. It's not a competition yet. There's no real need to hurry, so just take your time, focus on being precise, focus on the craftsmanship of the build. There we go. Let's go ahead and put in the remaining screw there. Once again, I'm just focusing on the craftsmanship of the build, not really worrying about the time of it. So once again, I'm just putting it in another star pattern, and just have a good time with the build. Part of the enjoyment of this hobby is building out the kit. Too often, I think racers are just impatient, and we have the tendency to just kind of rush through things. And if you rush through the build, you would have problems later on as you're racing, actually. So just taking that final step here, I'm just gonna just tighten the other side. And I apologize for the camera being out of focus at this point. I'm just so into fitment and the craftsmanship of the build. I've totally forgot about the camera placement. So just bear with me for a second here, and I should get the other screw in place here. Just so you know, it's you could actually build your car in just about any order, but just remember, it's important to have a clean working space. As you watch this series of videos, I want to let you know that my working space was not optimal, so I'm like kind of like a bad parent, like do what I say but don't do what I do. Just want you to know that always have a good working environment and a working space. But just so you know, like my build does get kind of messy because I'm waiting on parts, and sometimes I'm a little bit impatient with the build. But just so you know, your focus should really be on the craftsmanship of the build, how well you could do this build. Alright, so I've placed in the top screw into the plastic nose piece. I'm putting it there so I don't lose it because I'm still waiting on parts. You could actually store it somewhere else, but I found that I'm just putting it there just loosely for now so that I don't lose it. If I don't put it there, I find that, you know, like I've misplaced it, and then once the parts come, I won't be able to find it. So just remember that. Putting in the nuts in here, and you notice that I'm still using the stock plastic tool. I still have not had the nut driver, and I'm going to get that shortly after this one as I wait for the other parts to arrive. So pretty much I'm just using the stock plastic tool, and it's not I'm not really digging this tool too much. It's very labor intensive and it doesn't feel great, so I definitely recommend getting a nut driver set. And pretty much I was thinking, like, as I was building this, like, oh, I'm not going to need the nut driver set right away, but there are going to be a lot of nuts in this particular build. It's worthwhile to get a nut driver set. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and finish up this part of it and move on to the second half of the build.